2022 was decent. It wasn't. It was far from decent. World War III almost started between mainly Putin and Ukraine, but it's Russia and Ukraine. Still going on, so World War III could happen in 2023. We're going to be looking at why 2023 will be the worst year ever. Let's go see what 2023 has to offer.
The most foolish thing a person has ever said was, "Things can only get better." As you'll see today, it's all unrelenting horror. Things are sometimes not your friends. Things can sucker punch you, torment you, torture you. Don't ever rely on things again. Let us explain. At the end of 2020, you said from the prison of your home, "Oh well, at least things can't get any worse."
Turned out things got worse. Things got 10 times worse. World War III almost started twice.
Out that 2021 was the experiential equivalent of falling in dog poop headfirst, getting a bit of said poop in your mouth, contracting salmonellosis, and then dying in a lonely hospital bed from sepsis as your pooch was taking up residence in your comfortable bed at home. 2022 seemed to let up. For a while, you dared relax, to let down your guard, and then just as soon as your mouth brazenly began to form a smile, that black hole of demoralization, aka the media, took you to the brink of despair by telling you mankind might soon be snuffed out. It felt like disaster.
Yeah. World War III.
Dominoes, catastrophe chairs, a game you were mixed up in but did not want to play. Some of you dispirited spectators of endlessly bleak world events might think, "I can't take any more of this." We understand you. It feels like God, if there is indeed a God, is playing some sick game up there, testing the limits of your sanity.
Yeah, stop it. Stop playing the game Insanity, please. We don't like it.
Why hast thou forsaken me, you might have asked after watching another news story on TV about how different news channels seem more concerned about refuting the other channel or smearing a sworn political enemy rather than trying to intelligently discuss possible solutions to those seemingly endless problems.
Huh. Never really realised that, but now I think about it, that does actually happen.
First, there was COVID, the outbreak, which you have to admit you weren't too concerned about because it was on the other side of the world.
At first, yeah, we thought,
You know what? That's somewhere else. We're not going to worry.
But then it took a massive cruise ship, went to all the other countries and said,
You know what? Bang! That's what you get for thinking that you're safe.
Then the virus came knocking on your door and you weren't laughing anymore. You had to do a reshuffle, some spring cleaning regarding your hierarchy of external fears. Global warming came down a notch and being unable to breathe became everyone's #1 problem. You almost lost your sanity for being imprisoned in your house for months on end with no one but your dreaded family. Every day, like a masochist without a cause, you checked websites to look at death rates. It was a sign of the times. Fear was your master.
I'm dying already. To be honest, I guess that was the only thing to keep you sane. Look on the news and see bad things happen and you just talk about it with your friends.
You couldn't get enough of it. But it happened. The pandemic quelled. The line charts of death and suffering started their downhill journey. And even though some media never wanted to let you forget about it lest their viewership numbers stagnate, things really did get better. It was then that God up there in the clouds using nutcrackers to split apart sinful humans and a crab mallet to get the brain juice laughed out loud and said to himself, "You fools, you ain't seen nothing yet. Ha ha. 2023, my lab rats, is gonna knock you down on your backside." And
yeah, with the Omicron variant, World War III possibly because Putin doesn't know how to back down. It's gonna be a bumpy ride this year.
no, we're not talking about monkeypox, although we will discuss something viral and awful later. What God was thinking about was the war in Ukraine. He wonders what Vladimir Putin will taste like and who he'll eat for dessert. There are so many...
Oh God. Oh. What is the Almighty God gonna do with that bald-headed douche?
sinners to think about. God knows only too well that there's a word in the human race of late that has become disturbingly powerful. That word is escalation. Not long ago, humans barely heard the word. They'd usually...
Yeah, we barely used the word escalation. Well, we barely used it, but now it's like, it's a common word now. An escalation of war. An escalation of COVID deaths. An escalation of COVID rates. Escalation after escalation. We used to use escalation for escalators like this.
You only hear it in its proper noun form, a thing as in a set of moving stairs powered by a machine, i.e. an escalator. But now, escalation is a word that should give you nightmares. It's quite rightly one of the worst words in the human language right now. As this show is being created, everyone's talking about it. Some people even want it. But if they get it, they...
Well, I wouldn't say I want it. I mean, a zombie apocalypse would be fair decent. I feel like a zombie apocalypse would be the best way to get out. The best way, you know, instead of being stuck in your house, because something could just knock the door down, and then you're trapped in your own house, and you won't be able to get out. So, you know, it would be the best way to get out the house. Go on an adventure.
soon might find out that everyone they know will be burned to death in a huge ball of radioactive fire. You see, the main countries supporting Ukraine have been saying that they will keep up the military support. And while countries such as the US and the UK are already sending over billions of dollars of weapons, they've promised to top it up in 2023.
Promise to top it up. Promise to top up the amount of billions of pounds of weapons sent to Ukraine. How are they going to top that up more? I'm guessing by sending armed men from the armed military, I'm guessing, instead of just sending weapons.
This is gonna make life really hard for Russia. This, you're now thinking, is a great thing. You're proud of that support. Ukraine might just use those weapons well, and Russia might be pushed back even further. But Putin just withdrawing his troops and saying, sorry guys, is highly unlikely. At least it feels that way right now as the show is being made. The war could get nuclear if Russia suffers more losses. This is not...
Oh yeah, I really don't think Russia's gonna back down. Putin's not gonna back down, you know. The guy's dying, and his last dying wish is to get the Soviet Union again. Which is never gonna happen anyway, because Poland and all the other countries, all the other neighboring countries from Ukraine, they're all part of NATO now.
Us being hysterical, it really could. And if it does, for millions of people, many millions, life will end, or at least become infinitely crap. People will then look back on lockdowns and their obsession with death statistics with a dreamy fondness. COVID will seem like a party. They'll miss the days of quiet, unexceptional lockdowns when life was more simple and people were kind.
People were not kind during lockdown. You'd have tons of people making parties and stuff during lockdown. That doesn't seem kind, that just seems selfish.
Just ask Fiona Hill, a former working-class Brit from the North who educated herself and went on to advise Presidents Bush, Obama, and Trump on Russia. She knows a lot about Russia. She studied Putin for a lifetime. She knows more than most people about the things he's prepared to do. These words came from her mouth in 2022. Putin is increasingly operating emotionally and likely to use all the weapons at his disposal, including nuclear ones.
Oh no. Look at it on a bigger scale. I'm not ready for a nuclear war because there isn't a nuclear bunker anywhere near where I live. So I'm toast. Where are the military bunkers? Let's look where all the nuclear bunkers are. Oh my god, there's a nuclear bunker near Preston.
She knows that most folks think he would never go that far. To that she said, well, yes, he would. She believes this war may result in World War III. Maybe not now, but soon enough. She says the world as we know it has been changed forever.
Most
of course,
definitely.
There's a comedic element to this show, as you might have guessed from that dog poop thing, but unfortunately, there's a very serious element to it. There are a lot of different opinions regarding this war and why it started.
Yeah, but it's not just Ukraine and Russia. There's Beijing and Taiwan. There's North Korea and South Korea. So many countries out there having conflicts with each other that are gonna end up in serious wars.
Still, one thing everyone agrees on is this is one of the scariest times in human history. Many people who have followed the US, Ukraine, NATO, Russia relationship for many years are now saying we should start accepting that a nuclear war could happen.
A nuclear war, meaning nuclear fallout, fallout in real life. Yeah, probably the worst time in history.
Right now, we guess some of you are still saying, nah, I won't get to that. If that's true, why then are so many people who have the most expertise in this area saying it might? Do you know something they don't? The Pulitzer Prize winning journalist Chris Hedges put a lot of the blame on why this war started on NATO, and particularly US foreign policy. You might not agree with his assertions, many people don't, but maybe we should not ignore what he says when he tells us this skirmish of nations could well lead to the apocalypse. Apocalypse is a big word to bite off and digest.
Apocalypse? I mean, usually when you use phrases as apocalypse, well, apocalypse means a world-ending thing, like the planet will end, the planets will die, the planet as a whole. But would it be a nuclear apocalypse, I'm guessing? We're all gonna need hazmat suits. And I don't think there's enough hazmat suits for 8 billion people.
But if you've read your history, you'll know how stuff escalated to pure horror really fast during past wars. As we said, you might disagree with Hedges' take on the genesis of the war. He can at times sound like a doom-addicted preacher, but that might be because he's a student of war and has covered war for decades. You might not want to take all his comments lightly, especially when he says such things as, war accelerates the whirlwind of industrial killing.
Well, when it comes, with this war that's happening, it's like escalating so much. Like, there isn't a de-escalation. I mean, there'll be a de-escalation like there was like a couple months back, where Putin just like stood back a bit, he pulled his troops back. But then he threw a bunch of rockets over to Ukraine.
The longer any war can...
So, it is very possible that a nuclear war will happen, I mean, I don't see the reason to why he would put it into a nuclear war, because he just wants Ukraine as a country back. I mean, for the Soviet Union, which isn't good, but I don't know. Maybe he could send a nuke over to the USA or the UK.
Continues the closer and closer each side comes to self-annihilation. Unless it is stopped, the proxy war between Russia and the US in Ukraine all but guarantees direct confrontation with Russia, and with it the very real possibility of nuclear war. It doesn't matter if you dislike him for saying proxy war. What matters is his contention about obliterative escalation.
Proxy war, to me, that sounds like war via the internet.
In that regard, he agrees with Mrs. Hill, even if they disagree on many other things. As we make the show, a Harvard Kennedy School professor says there's a 10 to 20% chance this war will become nuclear. The more Ukraine...
10 to 20%? Those are... So it's on a ratio of 90-10 or 80-20. By 80 or 90%, there won't be a nuclear war. Possible, but really 10 or 20%? I'd say it's like 70-30 at least. But by now, it's at least 70-30 because it's escalating so many times.
Ukraine is successful, the higher the likelihood of nuclear war, he said. That doesn't mean people shouldn't want Ukraine to have success. The country has been invaded, a war crime no less, and its citizens are suffering, but ironically, success might also mean apocalypse. Diplomacy would be a better option, but it seems some people are allergic to it. People right now are banging drums for more war, yet we're on the precipice of something truly cataclysmic. They say Putin is using nuclear blackmail, and by God, should mankind hope this is true.
Oh yeah, he is using nuclear blackmail. He's blackmailing everyone with nuclear threats. I mean, I hope it is, like this is saying, I hope it is just nuclear threats and he doesn't, go on these threats.
But what if it isn't? This might mean 2023 is the worst year since humans started drawing their dinner on cave walls. This war, to some analysts, is the start of something that could get really, really serious. China might even get involved. Many people are now talking about
If China get involved, the planet's definitely screwed.
Lot more than the daily news reports about Russia and Ukrainian wins and losses on the battlefield. Some people say the military-industrial complex doesn't want the war to stop. It wants escalation, since stopping would be cutting off that sweet flood of money. The eternal threat means constant military expansion. But what if China becomes just as powerful as the US in the near future? If unipolarity becomes bipolarity, what then? This is a time of great change in the world of international politics, and you should be very concerned. If things go wrong in 2023, it will be the worst year in the history of our planet. Let's face it, there seems to be more hawks than doves right now within the various poles of global power politics. Are the hawks really willing to take us to the hell that is nuclear war? The BBC wrote in October, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russian officials have begun to prepare their society for the possible use of nuclear weapons. The New York Times wrote about the same time, Ukrainians brace for possibility of Russian nuclear strike. It may start with tactical nukes, but soon escalate to strategic nukes. If something like it does happen, we're doomed. Just look at what happened in Japan with only 2 nuclear bombs, and relatively meager ones at that. Japan surrendered. It makes the recent New York City nuclear survival ad on TV look absolutely ridiculous. If the big one hits, the woman in the ad said, we should close our windows. We don't think closing your windows will help very much.
Yeah, come on. If a nuke went out, closing your windows ain't gonna do anything. Because it's gonna be a massive shockwave that's just gonna smash the windows through. You're done for. You know, even the shockwave would shake all the houses, making all the bricks, collide with each other and then just collapse. So the best thing to do is to get out of town as quick as you can.
Dad even then tells viewers that after the explosion, they should use soap and water to clean themselves of the radioactive dust. Well,
Soap and water? Soap and water? From radioactive? Right. From a nuclear weapon, yeah, if you clean yourself of nuclear dust, okay, fair enough. But what you're gonna do if there's nuclear air, where the air is nuclear? You can't do anything. What are you gonna do? Brush your teeth? Stick soap down your throat? That's just gonna kill you.
what if they don't have any skin to clean? What if they're too vaporized to get to a bathroom that no longer exists?
Oh, God, that's just making me quease.
This ad was directed at New Yorkers, too, a densely populated city that would be an attractive target to an enemy. Many people who've studied what would happen in the event of a full-blown nuclear war have talked about a nuclear holocaust happening. You cannot just dust off an attack, then go back to watching Love Island on your TV as if nothing happened.
If you watch Love Island, you should just walk into that nuclear shockwave. Just watch a couple of your friends argue, for Christ's sake. Seriously, just watch a couple of your friends argue and get back together again. There you go, there's your Love Island in real life.
It means mass death on a scale humanity has never seen. Soap and water won't make much of a difference. We're not sure if enough people really understand the gravity of nuclear war. In October, a writer who calls himself a national security insider talked about a Russia, Ukraine, and NATO disaster. His worst-case, very possible scenario looked like this. The two sides are locked in an escalatory cycle that, along current trends, will eventually bring them into direct conflict, and then go nuclear, killing millions of people and destroying much of the world.
Millions of people. That is better than billions of people. But when you kill millions of people, you're not going to get billions of people. When you kill millions of people, you're just going to get millions of people left.
This is obviously a bold prediction and certainly an unwise one to make, in part because if I'm right, I'm unlikely to be around to take credit for it. The writer of that article was Jeremy Shapiro, the research director for the European Council on Foreign Relations. His specialty is U.S. foreign policy. He also served in the U.S. State Department from 2009 to 2013. People issuing such dire warnings are not just some loons on social media trying to increase their audience numbers. Shapiro said if Russia starts losing too badly, which seems probable, it might use tactical nuclear weapons, after which NATO will strike back. This is a scenario he hopes won't become a reality. If it does, he said, this will happen next. Fearing that those attacks will destroy the Russian strategic nuclear capability and thus leave them defenseless against NATO conventional forces, the Russians will launch a first strike strategic nuclear attack on the slim hope that it'll weaken the Western resolve or capability to respond and save their regime. I will then have something in the order of a few minutes to send out an email to my colleagues saying, I told you so. If that's not bad, we don't know what is. But there are a few more reasons why 2023 is going to be the astrological Chinese year of the toilet. The war is also caused
Oh god, I'm getting all the chills. No. Oh.
an energy crisis, which won't just go away next year. In fact, this winter, it's believed that so many people will struggle to heat their homes and that there will be a significant increase in the number of deaths in the worst affected places. The fact that power is so expensive in some nations means those without much money will go without electricity and possibly food. This will lead to widespread ill health, which might manifest as a really bad decrease in life expectancy in the coming year. We'll talk about this decrease in life expectancy soon.
You know what? You know what I think will be really annoying is if if thousands and millions of people start dying because of not being able to heat their homes, and then prices start going down again. That's gonna say to me, oh, they had a strategy in mind.
2022, the Financial Times asked experts how the energy crisis will affect health in Britain alone. And the answer they got back was it will put a health time bomb under Britain's most vulnerable. The BBC wrote, with the world in the grip of a global energy crisis, hundreds of millions of people are now facing fuel poverty this winter as they struggle to keep their homes warm. The consequences could be wide-reaching and long-lasting. Yay to 2023. In case you didn't know, many people living in so-called rip-off Britain struggle to pay their energy bills anyway. But this crisis has made matters a life or death situation, and just imagine how the Ukrainians will suffer. Britain is a wealthy nation, and this is a scenario the BBC said was going to happen in winter. Elderly people will wrap themselves in coats, scarves, and gloves to sit in their living rooms. Parents will worry about whether their babies are warm enough as they add an extra blanket to their cots. Gas fires will go unlit. In 2020, around 36 million people in Europe could not keep their houses warm when they needed to. At that same time, 16% of people in the U.S. suffered from what's called energy.
It's like it's a freaking action film, like a terrible it's like what film? This like well, any film that involved war.
Poverty. Around 25% of Chinese people live under the same conditions. It's thought this situation will get worse this winter. People will die, but others will suffer the ill effects after the winter. The BBC said there's a higher risk of stroke, respiratory infection, and falls or other injuries due to people's reduced strength and dexterity in low temperatures. Cold homes can have both short and long-term consequences for a person's health, well-being, and even their opportunities in life. The current energy crisis will spread out. The UK is already reporting a tsunami of need, and food banks are becoming the norm for many more people. The US and the EU also report that more people have turned to food banks right now. How will this affect social harmony? Will the resentment lead to people voting for the next wicked populist that comes along and spouts words of violence and hate? It's happened before.
I do with this war going on in Ukraine and Russia, and the massive domino effect it's having on other countries. You know, like the UK with the I want to say just overpriced crap. Yeah, let's go with overpriced crap. You know, with the massive energy crisis, that's it. I reckon it's gonna end up turning into anarchy. There's gonna be for example, like there was with the Black Lives Matter movement, or other type of protests. They just end up turning into utter anarchy. Where they'd start doing riots. But at some point, I do think that a riot may happen. I've said it here, folks. A riot may happen because of energy crisis. Because of energy crisis.
And it can happen again. You might remember hearing about what happened in Germany in the 1930s when a large part of the population was down on its knees in abject poverty. 2020.
I knew it was like the freaking World War II. I knew it. I knew that this was a repeat of World War II.
2023 might be a bad year of hopelessness for many people, and they might grab at any branch held out. And trust us, the reliably partisan, polarizing media will make things worse, not better. The global pandemic hurt us badly, but now with the war, the situation is much worse. The UK media is saying that even with more food banks, demand is so great right now that sooner or later people will have to be turned away empty-handed. That is a sad, sad thought, especially as many of the world's richest people are seeing their wealth rise astronomically, especially if they have large shares in arms or drugs industries. Talk about rubbing salt into gaping wounds. Something has to change. The world's most vulnerable need some good news for once. Unfortunately, they're not going to find it here today. Let's now focus solely on that cheery subject we call death. If you're worried right now, you're going
Wow, what a way to put it. A cheery subject. Death.
to be climbing the walls in a few minutes. Don't worry too much, we'll finish on a lighter note. In the UK, excess deaths have gone through the roof, with many thousands more people just dropping down dead. We're not talking about only COVID deaths either. Something is killing people, and we don't know what it is, or at least we aren't unequivocally sure what it is. The Spectator wrote in November, "What's causing these deaths? It isn't COVID. Just 27% of excess deaths in England for the most recent week have COVID as the underlying cause. Instead, problems that built up over lockdowns are being keenly felt now." The British Heart Foundation wrote that 30,000 people in England alone have needlessly died of heart disease since the start of the pandemic. 230 heart-related deaths per week. The media is saying it would not have occurred if lockdowns hadn't happened. We're not arguing against the lockdowns, we're just being the messenger of bad news. Please don't shoot us. In October, Fortune talked about young people in the US who were perfectly healthy, just dropping down dead from some kind of heart problem. The article mentioned the deaths of
Dropping from a heart problem? I hope the freaking cubes aren't coming for a freaking reality show. And if you don't know what I mean, you haven't watched Doctor Who.
formerly robust people with no history of health complications just suddenly giving up the ghost as their hearts failed them. The author believed the cause was people having had COVID in the past, and it later caused significant damage to the heart. We don't have the data related to excess deaths in the US, so it's impossible to ascertain the number right now. But what if things are similar to what they are in Europe and other countries for that matter? The EU and the UK have provided up-to-date death rate numbers, and it's scary what's been happening in 2022. If this continues to 2023, talk about a giant poop sandwich. In August 2022, many countries in Europe and we
Wait, I just want to check, because I feel like I need to check. Right, good. So, audio should be playing
many
through that.
showed a 15 to 30% rise in excess deaths compared to August 2016 to 2019. The EU reported that in July, Spain's excess death rate compared to pre-pandemic levels was up 37%. Cyprus up 33%,
Oh.
and Greece was up 31%. In other months, the death rate in many EU countries continued this trend, and as in the UK, many of these weren't direct COVID deaths. The EU said the heat waves possibly did it back in the summer, but right now it would seem something else can be blamed. The UK government wrote this in October relating to England and Wales. The number of deaths was above the 5-year average in private homes, 31.1% above 790 excess deaths.
Most of the deaths would have been suicides, there would have been monkeypox, there would have been some other type of disease or virus that wasn't COVID.
Deaths. Hospitals 14.5% above, or 678 excess deaths. Care homes 10.1% above, or 225 excess deaths. And other settings 2.5% above, or 20 excess deaths. It said 5.8% of the total deaths in England and Wales involved COVID. There were
5.8 are only due to COVID. Wow.
11,938 deaths for the week ending the 21st of October 2022. 1,714, it said, were excess deaths. A lot for just 1 week. We also found data that said in the Netherlands and Germany excess deaths were up for October. It's very worrying, which is why many EU and British politicians are asking for a thorough investigation. It's worth noting that the summer of 2022 was indeed Europe's hottest summer on record, but if you look at statistics, the summers in the years before the pandemic were also record-breaking. They also led to excess deaths, but
In 2022, we have had the hottest weather, and we've also had the coldest weather. So maybe 2023 with the weather, it's going to get worse.
now the excess deaths are in excess of those excess deaths. We need that investigation immediately because the increased death rates are frankly staggering. We don't know for sure what's causing it, and as we said, we don't yet know if it's happening in all countries since there isn't enough data yet. Some experts have said it could be linked to a COVID infection from the past, while others have said it could also be a consequence of lockdowns and associated health complications, or from the lack of medical care during pandemic imprisonment. The Seattle Times wrote in October,
Possibly.
U.S. heart attack deaths jumped sharply among young adults in second year of pandemic.
Ooh.
The article said this was because of complications after a COVID infection, although that's not 100% certain as of yet. Also, that data is fairly old. It would be worrying if these heart issues are still happening and will continue to happen in 2023. Israel wanted to figure out why so many young folks were getting myocarditis or pericarditis, inflammation of the heart muscles or tissue, and scientists have been working hard. In a recent paper published in the National Library of Medicine titled The Incidence of Myocarditis and Pericarditis in Post-COVID-19 Unvaccinated Patients, a large population-based study, the researchers concluded we did not observe an increased incident of neither pericarditis nor myocarditis in adult patients recovering from COVID-19 infection. The study consisted.
So unvaccinated patients weren't getting myocarditis and pericarditis. So the ones that were vaccinated were getting myocarditis and pericarditis.
In post-COVID-19 unvaccinated patients, a large population-based study, the researchers concluded we did not observe an increased incident of neither pericarditis nor myocarditis in adult patients recovering from COVID-19 infection. The study consisted of hundreds of thousands of people, and the number of people that developed pericarditis or myocarditis with or without getting COVID was about the same. It should be said men got it more than women, but what if these heart problems, as the study suggests, aren't related to having had COVID? Many other studies will be different, and some have discovered cardiovascular problems related to COVID-19. If all of these deaths are related or not related to past infections, it doesn't really matter to you as you head into 2023. What matters is that the death rates are disturbing and could potentially stay that way or even get worse. It's hard to understand since the data is incomplete, but it seems that death rates have been rising even though many of the most vulnerable people died already during the pandemic. Wouldn't that mean death rates should be going down? We found data on Japan and Australia that pointed to this worrying trend. Although European nations seem to be the worst hit, the UK's Telegraph wrote in October, experts believe higher deaths from heart complaints and diabetes mean the indirect effects of the pandemic will be greater than COVID itself. That's just one opinion, by the way, so wait for others. A week later, the Telegraph ran the headline, "Crisis as excess deaths soar to levels higher than during COVID pandemic." The Guardian called the massive rise in deaths a puzzle. The British Medical Journal, or according to Facebook fact checkers, a blog, also has articles that discuss these excess deaths. As we said, the data isn't in for all countries, but if it turns out that some experts are right and lockdowns led to more ill health, does this mean 2023 will be a year of excess deaths too?
Possibly.
The short answer is you might have a higher chance of dying next year than a few years ago when the virus was nothing but a twinkle in the eye of an atom. It seems that masses of people not seeking medical attention during the lockdowns, or people overeating and overdrinking or sitting on their backsides for too long, might have caused some everlasting damage to themselves. The National Bureau of Economic Research recently asked if this was collateral damage of policy choices. So, with the possibility of becoming an excess death statistic in 2023, coupled with the very real possibility of nuclear war doing a lot more than compelling you to rinse your skin with soap and water, this year has all the markings of a nightmare in the making. It's no surprise you're hearing less about other world issues at the moment, such as global warming and environmental destruction. As we said at the start, people's hierarchy of external fear sometimes has to be updated. We imagine yours has changed a lot over the last few years. Still, if this show has made you feel somewhat down about life, don't worry. We're going to give you some good news in a follow-up show. We guess the best show for you to watch now is What Happens When You're Dying, or brighten up your day with What Happens to Your Body After You Die.
What a lovely thing. Don't really know if I'm really up for 2023 anymore. It's gonna be a crap year. It's gonna be terrible. It really is. It's not gonna be brilliant. You know, like it said, World War III is gonna start. More COVID variants are gonna pop out the woodworks. More people are gonna die due to COVID or due to unforeseen circumstances. You know, like heart failures or whatever, or heart diseases, or being frozen to death because they can't heat their own homes because because the amount of gas and electric companies are freaking stingy as hell. It's gonna get worse. It's gonna get worse. It really is. It's gonna go terrible. Tons of shops are gonna close down because they're not gonna be able to afford to keep open. Tons of pubs are gonna close down, and then there might be a possibility of a zombie apocalypse happening because of the permafrost defrosting. And then that could bring up some zombie virus thing. Might possibly happen. You don't know. I mean, it probably won't be called a zombie virus. It'll probably be called some fancy name. I bet you it'll have a name from the freaking Resident Evil games. Anyway, I'm gonna, I don't know, do something to take my mind off 2023. I'll probably think about 2024, which will probably tend to be 10 times worse, or we might not even be here to see 2024. But anyway, I'm gonna go now. I'm gonna try and ease my mind. Yeah. I hope you're as unsettled as I am, because I'm very unsettled right now due to that video. So I'll see all of you later. Bye.